Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And we end the week in Greenland, the Caribbean, and with a slice of fashion. But before all of that, let's get you caught up on the latest headlines. The Trump administration revokes at least 300 visas of foreign students as part of a crackdown on pro-Palestinian protesters on university campuses. China warns the Philippines against starting a conflict in the South China Sea with U.S. support as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth reaffirms the partnership with Manila. A powerful earthquake strikes Myanmar and neighboring Thailand, turning a 1,000-bed hospital in Myanmar's capital, Naypyidaw, into a mass casualty area. Turkish authorities arrest the lawyer of jailed Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu as one of the largest civil disorders continues to grip the country. And Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese calls for general election on May 3rd amid a major cost of living crisis. We begin in Greenland, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance have arrived for their controversial visit. The Vice President's uninvited visit is being viewed as provocation by Denmark and Greenland amid President Trump's continued threats to annex the island. On Thursday, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen reiterated her stance, saying the autonomous Danish territory belongs only to Greenlanders.
Greenland belongs to the Greenlandic people, and Greenland is part of the Danish kingdom, and that is not going to change. I think that many Greenlandic politicians gradually, both before the election campaign, during the election campaign, and also now, are very clear that Greenland wants to be Greenland, and we fully support that from the Danish side.
Meanwhile, Denmark's defense minister condemned Vance's visit, citing President Trump's escalated rhetoric regarding Greenland. And in a surprise reaction from Russia, President Vladimir Putin warned Trump's plans to take over Greenland were actually serious. Speaking at the Arctic Forum on Thursday, Putin said the United States has been planning to annex the island since the 1860s.
Everybody knows very well about the U.S. plans to take over Greenland, though it can be surprising only at first sight. It's a huge mistake to think that it is just extravagant talk of the new U.S. administration. Not even close. In fact, the U.S. had such plans as far back as in 1860s. Even back then the U.S. administration thought about possibility of Greenland and Iceland annexation. But that idea was not supported by the U.S. Congress.
Now, Greenland is home to 57,000 people and holds untapped reserves of oil and minerals. And while Greenlanders are seeking complete independence from Denmark, they don't support the idea of joining the United States either. However, President Donald Trump considers Greenland's wishes as secondary and desires to take over the island, citing national and global security.
It has created a lot of fear and unrest in this country that Trump keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. It must be stopped. I hope you can do it at home locally or at home in the United States and tell him that Greenland has said no, we don't want Americans here.
The latest U.S. trip to Greenland was initially a much broader visit by a delegation to be led by Second Lady Usha Vance. She was scheduled to attend Greenland's national dog sled race and see cultural sites. However, resentment from Nuuk and Copenhagen reduced the visit to the American base and forced Vice President Vance to accompany his wife. Back in January, a visit by Donald Trump Jr. also sparked massive backlash from the government and citizens of Greenland. And now to the Caribbean, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio has strongly warned Venezuela against its intentions for its oil-rich neighbor, Guyana. As part of his three-nation tour of the Caribbean, Secretary Rubio arrived in Guyana on Thursday and met with President Ibrahim Ali in Georgetown. Now, during their joint press conference, Rubio warned any Venezuelan attack on Guyana would result in severe consequences for Caracas.
It would be a very bad day for the Venezuelan regime if they were to attack Guyana or attack ExxonMobil or anything like it. It would be a very bad day, a very bad week for them, and it would not end well for them. I'm not going to get into details of what we'll do. We're not big on those kinds of threats. I think everybody understands, and I want it to be clear. We've made this clear repeatedly. I think the U.S. Navy today is making it clear and demonstrating our ability to. We have a big Navy, and it can get almost anywhere. It can get anywhere in the world. We have commitments that exist today with Guyana. We want to build on those, expand on those.
America's top diplomat also called Venezuela a narco-trafficking regime and criticized its long-standing territorial claims on the Essequibo region.
Sometimes crime is attracted by prosperity and targets prosperity, and the other are regional threats. The regional threats based on illegitimate territorial claims by a narco-trafficking regime. And I want to be frank, and I've said this during my time as a senator, and I have full confidence in saying it now as a Secretary of State. There will be consequences for adventurism. There will be consequences for aggressive actions.
Now, both Venezuela and Guyana have been locked in a dispute over land and maritime borders for decades now. The territory in question is the Essequibo region, which accounts for 2/3 of Guyana's area, but is claimed by Venezuela. The region inhabits more than 120,000 people, is largely jungle, and has huge reserves of oil, gold, and copper. Meanwhile, in response to Rubio's latest warning, Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro has called Rubio an idiot, an imbecile.
The idiot Marco Rubio is out there threatening Venezuela from Guyana. Imbecile, no one threatens Venezuela because this is the homeland of the liberators. This is the homeland of Bolivar, imbecile. And they say this is a regime, a dictatorship. Marco Rubio has never seen a popular assembly, has never been to a neighborhood because they are part of the corrupt Miami elite, very corrupt, who hate Venezuela.
Rubio's warning came weeks after an armed Venezuelan naval vessel entered the disputed waters. Georgetown denounced the incursion, and the Trump administration echoed Guyanese President Ali's concerns. Any Venezuelan attack in the Essequibo region significantly worries the United States, as Texas-based ExxonMobil is developing a mammoth oil deposit in the region. The American Oil and Gas Corporation discovered large reserves off Guyana in 2015, making it one of the world's fastest-growing economies. In 2018, Guyana asked the International Court of Justice to rule on the territorial dispute, but Venezuela's disputes have continued to delay a decision so far. In December of 2023, Maduro met Ali, and the two leaders agreed to avoid military force against each other. However, just 4 months after their meeting, Venezuela passed a law annexing Essequibo as a new state, further escalating the border tensions with Guyana. And moving to the war in Europe, Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed placing Ukraine under temporary UN control to pave the way for new elections and key peace agreements. Claiming that President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership lacks legitimacy, Putin insisted bringing in a third party to be a viable government that, quote-unquote, enjoys the people's trust.
In principle, of course, it would be possible, under the auspices of the UN, with the United States, even with European countries, and of course with our partners and friends, to discuss the possibility of introducing temporary administration in Ukraine. For what? In order to hold democratic elections, in order to bring to power a viable government that enjoys the people's trust, and then begin negotiations with it on a peace treaty.
However, the Russian leader's proposal has been met with skepticism. The White House National Security Council emphasized that Ukraine's governance is determined by its constitution and its people. There has been no immediate comment from Ukraine, however. President Zelensky has repeatedly rejected any notion questioning his legitimacy, and he insists that elections are impossible under martial law, which he imposed in response to Russia's invasion back in 2022.
Regarding the UN, with all due respect, the UN will not protect us from the occupation or Putin's desire to come back. We don't see the UN as an alternative for the military contingent or security guarantees. The deal of complete ceasefire has been on the table for a week. There is no ceasefire only because Putin does not accept this offer. So, we need to put pressure on Russia.
Now, as the situation remains tense, the U.S. has signed separate ceasefire agreements with Moscow and Kyiv for the Black Sea. However, Russia says the pact will only take effect if sanctions on a state bank are in fact lifted. The Kremlin also previously dismissed a broader 30-day ceasefire proposal from Washington.
We will need clear guarantees. And there may be guarantees, taking into account the sad experience of agreements with Kyiv. Guarantees may be only the result of a direct order from Washington to Zelensky and his team to do this, and not any other way. And it seems to me that our American partners have accepted this signal.
Now, in the meantime, European leaders remain committed to bolstering Ukraine's defense capabilities. In fact, France and Britain have explored forming a reassurance force to secure Ukraine in case of a truce, but Russia firmly rejects any foreign troop presence.
The first message is clear. It's that we will continue to support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army in the short term. This is a necessity to be in the best possible condition to prepare for peace.
We've agreed that we must go further now to support the peace process, support Ukraine, and increase the pressure on Russia to get serious. That means, first, stepping up the military pressure, so the Defense Secretary will chair the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group on the 11th of April.
And in another surprising move, Putin has also confirmed Russia's readiness to work with North Korea and other nations to end the war. Western and Ukrainian sources estimate over 11,000 Korean troops have been deployed to bolster Russian forces in the Kursk region. As diplomatic efforts continue, European countries remain wary of Putin's moves. And with the war raging on, questions still linger if Putin's proposal will bring peace to Ukraine or deepen divisions. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's tattoos tell a story. He says they represent his faith, patriotism, and defiance. But it's the latest ink-stirring controversy that has raised eyebrows. The Secretary of Defense's Arabic tattoo reading kafir, meaning infidel or non-believer, has sparked outrage, with critics calling it a symbol of Islamophobia. Supporters argue it's a mark of defiance against extremism, but the backlash is fierce, and it comes at a time when Hegseth faces scrutiny for allegedly leaking military plans, adding fuel to an already blazing fire. Here's more on the controversy.
Pete Hegseth's tattoos are more than skin deep. For him, they are a battlefield of beliefs and a canvas of convictions. But now for the United States, they are a lightning rod for controversy. The U.S. Secretary of Defense's latest ink, the Arabic word kafir, meaning infidel or non-believer, has set off a storm. To some, it's a rebellious mark of defiance, but to others, a dangerous dog whistle. A pro-Palestinian activist didn't mince words, calling the tattoo a clear symbol of Islamophobia. Yet defenders paint a different picture. An ex-user described the tattoo as a warrior's mark, a symbol adopted by veterans who fought extremism in the Middle East. However, this isn't Hegseth's first inked scandal. On his right bicep, Deus Vult declares God wills it, which is a cry of the Crusaders. For some, it's a symbol of faith. For others, a chilling reminder of religious wars. But Hegseth believes his tattoos are a tale of faith, firepower, and freedom. On his forearm, We the People boldly salutes the Constitution, while 1775 in Roman numerals marks America's revolutionary birth. 13 stars circle his elbow, which is a nod to the Betsy Ross flag and colonial resolve. Then the join or die snake, drawn by Benjamin Franklin, slithers along his arm, urging unity against tyranny. Amongst several others, an American flag with a sniper rifle beneath it echoes support for the Second Amendment. His 187th Infantry Regiment patch honors his military service, and a cross and sword tattoo, inspired by Matthew 10:34, warns, "I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." This inked odyssey began innocently enough. Yet Hegseth's ink obsession might be more curse than blessing. The Yemen strike plan leak scandal has led to a bumpy start to his stint as the Secretary of Defense under Donald Trump. Amid accusations of leaking US military plans on the Signal app, Hegseth faces calls for resignation. Lawmakers are demanding an investigation, and the Pentagon remains silent.
Secretary Hegseth has disclosed military plans as well as classified information. He needs to resign immediately. He needs to resign immediately, and a full investigation needs to be undertaken with regard to whether other similar signal chats are occurring in this administration.
With every etched symbol, Hegseth's skin seems to be a battlefield. Ideology, faith, and controversy colliding. Is he a warrior with a message, or a man whose inked convictions are carving his downfall?
And we end the week with sportswear brand Hoka, which is facing criticism from the Maori culture. Sportswear giant Hoka is under fire for seemingly ghosting its Maori roots. The brand, whose name comes from the Maori word to fly, once acknowledged its indigenous origins, but quietly dropped the reference after being acquired by an American fashion giant in 2012. Now experts are calling out the company for profiting from Maori culture without giving it proper credit. Our final report has the details.
In the ever-growing landscape of global brands borrowing from indigenous cultures, sometimes with admiration, often with abandon, sportswear giant Hoka has landed in the hot seat. The French-American company, best known for its ultra-cushioned running shoes, has been accused of hurting the sentiments of indigenous communities in New Zealand. Experts say that Hoka has sidestepped the Maori origin of its name. Hoka, derived from the Maori word hoka meaning to fly, has always had an airborne theme. Its logo features a bird in flight, and its tagline, "Fly, human, fly," reinforces the brand's connection to the concept of soaring. While the company once acknowledged its Maori linguistic roots, originally naming itself Hoka 11, loosely translating to fly over Earth, that attribution mysteriously vanished after Decker's brand took over in 2012. Today, Hoka's website makes no mention of its name's cultural origins, leaving Maori experts unimpressed. Lionel Tafarihuria, the first Maori patent attorney and a respected expert on indigenous intellectual property rights, stated, and I quote, "If they don't want to associate themselves with the fact that it's a Maori word, then they need to stop using it." She questioned why a brand would so eagerly adopt a Maori term while refusing to acknowledge its heritage. Hoka, it seems, has been practicing selective memory.
First one up. What is this one, darling?
Hoka uni uni.
Hoka uni uni. Ka pai. Okay, Charlie.
The brand did at one point attempt to engage with the Maori culture briefly. In 2019, during Maori Language Week, a company video featured a Maori musician teaching viewers how to pronounce Hoka correctly. Fast forward to today, and the brand itself is reportedly mispronouncing its own name, along with the Maori-inspired names of some of its shoe styles. As Tafarihuria points out, Maori words and designs aren't just trendy aesthetics. They carry deep cultural meaning and often come with protocols that should be respected. She said, and I quote, "We want to share our culture, our language, our narratives, but it needs to be respected and protected in a manner that's consistent with how we view it." End quote. Hoka's shoe names are another sticking point. Models like Hopara, which means to explore, and Arahi, which means to lead, have sacred connotations in some contexts, demonstrate what experts describe as careless appropriation. Another expert said, and I quote, "By putting something sacred on your feet, it's like putting an image of a royal family member on the bottom of a shoe. It's offensive." End quote. For brands looking to draw inspiration from indigenous cultures, there's a clear takeaway. Consultation, respect, and acknowledgement are non-negotiable. For now, Hoka remains silent on the controversy. But as cultural awareness grows, companies like it may soon realize that ignoring the roots of a brand name won't help them take flight. It'll just cause turbulence.
That's First Post America for this Friday, March 28th. I'm Eric Ham, signing off from our studios here in Washington, D.C. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a great weekend.